Check, check.
Good afternoon, Port Washington family. Welcome back to the 21-22 school year. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Jen Biblowitz. I'm the coordinator of elementary guidance and the proud counselor of the Sousa Elementary School. I hope that all of you have had this summer to recharge, reconnect with family and friends, and most of all, be gentle with yourselves. Last year was a challenge, the likes of which we have never experienced as educators. To say that we were flying the plane while building it in the air would only minimize our Herculean efforts to educate children. But the upside of this experience is that this year we can tap into the new expertise that we have and remember what we know. Trust our professionalism, our integrity as educators. Before I introduce our esteemed guests, I'd like to invite you all to take a moment and remember your why. Why did you choose to become an educator? It certainly wasn't fame and fortune. Was it to have a corrective experience from your own educational journey? Was it to honor a teacher who inspired you or a family member that inspired you? Was it to affect the future of young people? Whatever your why, use this as your beacon. Let it guide you to remember to tap into how those experiences made you feel. We are all talking a lot more about mental and emotional well-being. We have finally accepted the science and connection to how people learn and grow. We as humans must feel emotionally connected and safe in order to allow the seeds of education to grow. Our district, with the guidance of central administration and the school board, has come to the understanding of this important connection by allowing our district to grow into a ruler district, a district that creates space and guidance for students, staff, and families to build a toolbox of strategies to help regulate emotions so that we can become a more compassionate, inclusive, productive, and healthy society. Without further ado, it is my honor to introduce to you Dr. Mark Brackett, founding director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and world-renowned author of Permission to Feel, a book that has now been translated into many different languages. Dr. Brackett's ruler approach has made significant impact in communities all over the globe. Please help me welcome Dr. Mark Brackett.
Thank you. Take your mask. Oh, boy. So, how's everybody feeling? Maybe you don't want to be asked that question this year. I know people ask me all the time, so how are you feeling, Mark? And I'm like, I'm a mess. Like, but you're the director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence. I'm like, so what? I got feelings, and they're all over the place. So firstly, thank you for inviting me here. I have to say, I'm a little burnt out from doing presentations. I've probably done about 1,000 or so in the last 3 years. I feel like I do a presentation or two a day. But because of Jen and Dave and your superintendent, I just feel like obligated to be here, honestly, because I have seen the work that you have done, and it just makes you feel good to know that people are doing the best they can for children and the adults that are serving them. So we have an hour and 20 or so minutes. That's a long time to be sitting in a seat staring at some guy from Connecticut. And I hope I can make this worth your while. What I want to start off with, I like to just give people resources up front. So if you have any questions for me or my team, you can go to my website and download free articles and join book clubs and newsletters. And obviously, if you use social media for the good, please stay connected with us there. I tend to start presentations these days with a quote. That's good. And so I'm going to ask us all to just take a moment and read this excerpt from a book by Haruki Murakami. And once the storm is over, you won't remember how you made it through, how you managed to survive. You won't even be sure whether the storm is really over. But one thing is certain. When you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. Just think about that for a minute, how the last 18 months has sat with you. How have you grown? You know, it's interesting. During the pandemic, I was very curious for the things that people thought they were grateful for. So I launched a national study, and the findings were unsurprising. It was actually a boring study. We asked thousands of people, so what are you grateful for these days during a pandemic? And everything was as you might expect. I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for my job. I'm grateful for my resources, financial resources if you had them. I'm grateful for my health. And I sat back and I thought, like, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Are there other things for which we might be grateful? Like teachers and educators who are busting their butts, right, to make sure that children have an amazing education. Like healthcare workers who are putting their lives at risk every day to ensure the health and safety of our society. Like the UPS delivery person, as we're ordering all this crap online, who has to come to our door. Like the grocery store clerk who, has to be around different people every single day. Like the waiter or waitress, right, who's out of their work. During the pandemic, I was fortunate enough to support a documentary that was made. And one of the focuses of that documentary was looking at undocumented immigrants. And we tracked thousands of them throughout New York City, Brooklyn and Queens and elsewhere. And there's a scene in this film, which is not released yet, that just blew my mind. So here we are in a beautiful area of Long Island. We drive nice cars and we live good lives. And here I was with my partner who's a filmmaker on the streets of Queens, filming people in lines that you can't even imagine just lines and lines and lines of people waiting to get food, because most of these undocumented immigrants have not had jobs because the restaurants closed and this is where they work. And you hear mostly Latino names being called out. And I remember this woman, the person who was handing out the food, say, Maria Ramos. And nobody went up to get food. And I was sitting there thinking, like, lie. Just like bullshit. Like, go get food. You're starving. Like, just lie and go take the food. Like, no one's coming. Just like sneak in front and get the food. And I actually went up to someone and said, why don't you just go get, you need this so desperately, please. And this woman looked at me, she goes, I can't do that. And I was like, I started crying there because I just think, gosh, like this person has nothing and is not willing to take the food that she needs to thrive and survive. And yet, like, I live a lifestyle that I never thought I could live. And, we're in a society where we just kind of have lost perspective on what it means to be human. And so that's going to be the theme of today's presentation. Now, a lot of you have seen my book. I'm grateful for that. A lot of you have been trained in ruler. And so some of you have probably gotten your tattoo of the mood meter. Anybody got that yet? I always say, like, if you're willing to get the tattoo, I'm willing to pay for it. So this is a deceptively simple tool. It's deceptively simple. All of you are feeling something. You woke up this morning and you knew some guy was coming to talk about feelings for an hour and a half. And some of you were like, oy, I cannot believe our superintendent invited this guy to talk about emotional intelligence for an hour and a half. And some of you are like, oh my goodness, an hour and a half talking about feelings. There's nothing better in life. I know Jen was that way. So I ask all of you right now to just think about how you're feeling. And I'm going to take this a little further today. I'm going to share with you what I think is some of the most interesting research, which is that we like to think that our brains have been built for thinking. Our brains are built to survive, or to help us survive. And when you think about that, you realize that the emotion system is much deeper than the cognitive system. Because every day we walk into our classrooms, we walk into our homes, we walk anywhere, and we're appraising the environment, right? Is this safe? Am I going to be comfortable? Can I be my true self here? Or am I going to be unsafe and in danger? Our brains are doing that instinctively. And then we go inside of our bodies and we think about our energy levels. Like, do I feel energized and I can thrive? Or do I feel depleted of all of my resources and I just feel like I'm at the end of my rope and I have no gas? And those are the axes of the mood meter. And so I ask all of you to just take a moment and think about where you are right here, right now. What color are you in today? Yellow, high, energy, and pleasant. Raise your hand if you're in the yellow. Green. Can't even see your hands. You're that low energy. Anybody in the blue or the red? Yeah, it's okay. We're going to be all over the mood meter. I promise you. You will be having a lot of feelings this year. Get used to it. As my father would say, get over it. That's why I'm a psychologist, by the way. So I'm going to ask all of you now to convert your color to a specific feeling word. Really get granular here. Get specific. How are you feeling? You got 3, 2, freeze. Can I get an honest raise of hands? How many of you found it somewhat difficult to find that precise word? Anyone? Hands up high. Lift them up high. Stretch it out. Really high. So a good 70% of you. You might come up with some hypotheses around that. Anyone have one? Why would it be? I mean, all of you are supposed to be doing social emotional learning. and you can't describe how you're feeling? You don't let yourself feel. That's interesting. Would you like to say more about that? The principal of the middle school, we don't let ourselves feel. Let me know that. So anybody who works in that school, good luck. All right. Other so many mixed emotions. Like how many? Thousands? Okay. We call that mental illness, just so you know. Like, how many feelings are you having? 3,000. I'm like, oh, okay. Lock her up. Aren't you a principal too? Hey. We're going to work on, new credentials for leadership in the district. One is a suppressor, the other one can't stop feeling. Any other hypotheses? Yeah. Just don't have the words. Yeah, I agree with that. Most of us say things like fine, okay, right? How many of you really get detailed when people ask you how you feel? We don't do that. Why don't we do that? Because you have to react? What were you going to say? That's how what? You have to open yourselves up. I'm not going to do that. For sure. Dave, ask me how I'm feeling. Fine. How about you? Okay. Yeah, good. All right, good. Dr. Hines, ask me how I'm feeling. Well, Superintendent, to be honest with you, it's a rough. I had this gross lunch on the streets of Port Washington. I'm bloated. I'm kind of bloated from the sushi that was. I don't know what I was eating. I'm also irritable, slightly overwhelmed, and I honestly have this odd mixture of anxiety and hopelessness. Yeah, and it's like, good luck. Welcome to our district. But we're not used to being authentic, right? I mean, how many of us express our true feelings? For some bizarre reason, we have been brought up in a society that tells us to not show how we feel, to not talk about our feelings. What do you think are the consequences of that? It's endless, right? What were you going to say? Repression. That's the best strategy of all. Repress your feelings for your whole life. So that way you get cancer and heart disease and become an alcoholic and all these things, which is what research shows, by the way. Your feelings have to go somewhere. They just got to go somewhere. You can bottle them up your whole life, but then they somehow or another get an ulcer or something else happens. Okay, so we're here for about another hour and 15 minutes or so, and I just want to ask another question. How many of you are going to get distracted at some point? Okay, everybody. Great. I was like, it's like, yes, we're proud to be emotionally illiterate and attention deficit disordered. Perfect combo. Good luck. It's going to be a great year. But more honestly, what's going to be your strategy? It's going to be a tough year. We know that, no matter what. Every year's a tough year. No year is, nobody gets a free ride. Even today, right? Like, you're not used to probably sitting and listening to people speak for an hour and a half or so. It's hard to do. I know. I wouldn't want to be a participant in my own presentation. So what's going to be your strategy for getting the most out of it? When you notice yourself drifting, when you notice yourself saying, oh gosh, I could really use a cup of coffee right now, or, oh God, I think I have to go to the bathroom just because I want to get out of the room. I really want to text my family member. I really want to go on social media to just look at something because I have no ability to focus. What's going to be your strategy? Anyone have one? Back there. Can you just have fun? Oh, take notes. I was projecting for you, saying, have fun. So take notes. You're going to take notes. All right, thank you. Other strategies. Pay attention. Okay? So I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to take notes. What else? Yeah. Say it louder, please. You're going to get involved, like you just did. Perfect. So you're going to get involved. Other strategies. Yeah. Wait for a joke. I'm going to tell you, this training is just like my course evaluations. At Yale, they have this thing called shopping period, so I really like do everything I can for the first 2 weeks while they're like picking a class, and then my end of the year evaluations always say, like, he's great for the first 2 days, and it's downhill from thereafter. So, looking for humor, it helps. Other strategies. Yeah. Say it louder, please. You have to be here. So just suffer. Suffer through it. Or just say, I got to be here. I'm going to make the most out of it. That's a good attitude. One more. Visualize yourself. Visualize yourself buying into it. That's an interesting idea. Cool. Give me a raise of hands. How many of you during the pandemic, at one point or another, were like, I'm having a breakdown. Like, I just can't take it. I just can't, I'm just losing. I just don't want to be here. How many of you work with a student at some point, had a breakdown, just like meltdown? Many of you? Okay. And so that student is coming to you, they're crying, they can't take it, they're afraid of this, they're scared of this, they don't know what to do, their friendships, their connections, their blah, 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 blah. And then you just say to the kid, you know what? You got to be here. It's a good strategy, right? Honestly, stop worrying about all this stuff in life. Just take notes. Take notes. Just take notes. And if that doesn't work, you know what, kiddo? Visualize yourself. Visualize. Now, people who shared are like, I hate this guy. And I'm not trying to make fun of you. I'm just trying to be real. It's hard to regulate. How many of you would agree? Yeah, it's hard. So we'll talk a little bit about that today too. For those of you who know the work, there are lots of words to describe your emotions. Actually, we just finished a study. We have 16,000 feeling words. And here's just 100. Think about what's different about language for emotion. We talked about this a minute ago. Science teachers, math teachers, language arts teachers, physical education, whatever your topic area is, there's a language, right? There's a language for your work. You talk about different types of mathematical problems, whether it be math, whether it be subtraction, division, pre-calculus, calculus, there's algebra, there's all a language that helps you communicate about math. And there's a language to help you communicate and understand your inner experiences. But yet we spend very little time developing it. Maybe it should be a human right to be self-aware. That would be interesting, wouldn't it? Okay. So I thought you might want to see some data. You got a scientist in the house, so let me just share with you some data. What we know is the following. Mental health, pre-COVID, not looking so good. Look at the data here. The most interesting to me, because I'm a college teacher, 60% of college students, that means the students who graduate from these districts, are coming to us and they can't handle their feelings. 60% report overwhelming anxiety. It's been about a 20% increase now for the last 8 or 10 years. Depression, suicide ideation. Suicide rates have gone up 45%. The most recent years have shown even more dramatic increases. COVID-19 findings, about a quarter of our teenagers have lost confidence. Visits to the emergency room, up 24% for young children, 31% for teenagers. Adults reporting serious distress, 8 times more likely than they were 3 years ago. Bullying and bias in America. I was a kid who hated school. I really did. I was horrifically bullied as a kid for every reason you could imagine. And, it's been 40 years since I was in middle school, and you would think, my goodness, the data, it should be better. Everybody's thinking about bullying, and I saw the bullying thing out here, and OAS program, and people are doing SEL stuff, and the list goes on. But yet still, national data suggests that about a third of children are bullied still each day or each year. We know we have racial bias. We can't deny that. We know that our black male students are 3.8 times more likely to get an outside of school suspension compared to their white counterparts. As a matter of fact, last year was one of the most challenging years ever for non-whites. Anti-black racism was at the top. Anti-Asian hate crimes and 150% increase. 40%, think about that, 40% of LGBTQ students considered suicide. Now I can't. And when you look at engagement, stress, and burnout, you see very similar data. So I share this all with you because it makes you wonder. At least it makes me wonder. We care so much about ourselves and kids. We want to do the best for them. But yet there's something missing in the implementation. And now we look at more recent data. These are just hot off the press in terms of how students are feeling right now. Frustrated, overwhelmed, anxious, and bored. College students, stressed, anxious. Educators back 3 years ago, frustrated. Educators this year, anxious. Principals this year, anxious. How teachers tell us they want to feel happy back 3 years ago. We just finished a national study of 17,000 teachers. Here's how teachers say they want to feel now. Just take a look at that, please. Appreciated comes up as the number one emotion. Does that resonate with you? It's like we just want to be seen. We want to be heard. We want our voices to matter. Now, one of the things that I find with these kinds of data is that it's very easy to get into the blaming game. Right? Well, if you did that, then I would feel appreciated, and if that happened, I would be appreciated. I just want to encourage you as a faculty and staff to think this way. What can we do today, next week, every day, every week, to ensure that everyone feels appreciated? Instead of making it about the me, make it about the collective. And so it just takes off the pressure of someone's responsible. We're all responsible for everybody's health and wellness. Now, as we go back to the mood meter, we see that we're kind of emotionally out of balance. We got a lot of red and blue, and we got a lot of hope for yellow and green. And so it brings up that question, like, what do we do with our feelings? And I've asked teachers these questions many times, and some people said, you know, Mark, my anxiety is so high, I'm just going to leave it at the door. I'm like, just so you know, that is biologically not possible. Yeah, I don't know about you, but you can't just like carve out your amygdala and leave it on the front step of your door. Like, your emotions are with you wherever you are. You can try to compartmentalize. It's a lot harder than you think. That's usually a form of suppression or repression. And so the title of my presentation is Permission to Feel. As you know, I wrote a book called Permission to Feel. Interestingly enough, when I was going to publish this book, my agent and the publisher said, we don't like the title. We like the content, but we don't like the title. And I said, well, why not just think it's a little too provocative. I don't see some guy in the airport picking up a book called Permission to Feel, but they'll pick up a book called Emotionally Intelligent Leadership. I'm like, ugh, like talk about boring. I'm not writing that book. And it's funny because over and over and over again, I get this pushback about this simple concept of giving oneself the permission to feel. I'm going to tell you why it's called that. And I apologize in advance if I'm sharing kind of personal data right now. So for those of you who know me, or I've read a little bit about my work, I had a really, really tough childhood. I was sexually abused between the ages of 5 and 10 by a neighbor who was actually the head of the Boys and Girls Club, which was pretty awful. And it went untold for 5 years because I was threatened by this person. This person basically told me, even as a young child, if you share what's happening, you will be harmed and your family will be harmed. Now you can imagine what it's like for a 5 and 6-year-old to go through with that experience and be silenced. The feelings of hatred, disgust, shame, not even having words for those feelings, but feeling it. I had 2 parents who loved me dearly, but they had their own emotional challenges to deal with. My mother was a terrifically anxious lady, and no matter what would happen in my household, she was always having her breakdown. Don't tell me what's happening, I'm going to have a nervous breakdown. My father was a tough guy from the Bronx, and his go-to strategy was, son, you got to toughen up. And so even if you're inclined to share something, you learn pretty quickly when you're working or living in an environment where the adults basically they can't handle your feelings, and this one's telling you not to have feelings. So what do? You repress and you suppress those feelings. I share that with you because by a wave of an incredible magic wand, someone appeared in my life who happened to be my mother's brother, who is Uncle Marvin. And Uncle Marvin was a middle school teacher in the Catskill Mountains of New York State by day and a band leader by night. And Uncle Marvin had this idea that the missing link in teaching social studies to 6th graders was feelings. And he started writing a curriculum to teach kids about history through the language of emotion. And so, luckily for me, he was going for his graduate degree in my hometown. And he would stay with us in the summer, one summer, on the weekends. And he would sit with me in the backyard. And he was the only adult in my entire life, by the time I was 11, who basically looked at me and said, Mark, how are you feeling? But he did it in a way like no one else had ever done. He did it with such love and connection that for whatever reason, I shared everything that was happening to me. And when I shared what was happening to me, he didn't say, get some grit, or toughen up, or oh my God, I can't handle this. He said, we're going to get through this together. And it was that moment in my life that everything turned around. Everything turned around. Now, interestingly enough, when my book came out, I was doing a book tour, and I'm in Westchester County doing a presentation. And I very rarely ask people, or previously I hadn't asked people, I even shared my story. I didn't share my own story until I was 49 writing my book. Didn't feel safe enough to do it in my own career. And I asked people, like I'm going to ask all of you right now, who is your Uncle Marvin? Did you have that Uncle Marvin? An aunt, an uncle, a teacher, a parent, a cousin, a coach, who just was there for you unconditionally, who had these characteristics: compassionate, empathic, accepting, validating, vulnerable, supportive, and the list goes on. Here's what the research shows. Only about 1/3 of our nation's youth believe they have an Uncle Marvin. That means 2/3 of children throughout the schools that you're supporting likely don't believe they have that person who is there for them where they can be their true, full feeling self. That doesn't require ruler training, by the way. That just requires making sure that every kid is seen and heard. Now, something else happened during this presentation. So when I shared this one guy looked at me like, I don't know, he looked like he was going to have a conniption. And he goes, "Mark, I can't believe it. Your Uncle Marvin was my Uncle Marvin." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Yes, you're talking about Marvin Moore, the 6th grade social studies teacher from Monticello, New York." I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "You're not going to believe this, but 45 years ago, your uncle was my 6th grade teacher." And I was like, "Are you kidding me? Well, you can't go anywhere because I got to meet you." And I said, "Do you mind staying after so I can interview you?" And I did. And I stayed with him for 45 minutes because he couldn't stop talking about my uncle. And he goes, "I remember the twinkle in your uncle's eyes. I remember his smile. I remember his goatee. I remember how he greeted us as we entered the classroom. I remember how he would talk about our experience and weave it into teaching and bring us back to our experiences and weave it into teaching." It was just mind-blowing to me how much he remembered. But then he did something that was even more difficult for me. He said, "Look, it's like, look what your uncle did for you. He not only helped you survive, but he helped you have a career." And I was like, everything is dedicated to Uncle Marvin. But then he looked at me and he said, "I'm curious, Mark. For whom are you an Uncle Marvin?" And I was like, I could start crying now because it hit me in such a hard way because I'm a workaholic. I just, I'm a career person. I'm achievement oriented. And as much as I love what I do, I don't spend a lot of time giving back that connection that my uncle provided for me during the most challenging times. That one note from him has changed me. It was 1.5 years or 2 years ago. So if there's one thing that I could leave you with at this point of my presentation, is just be that Uncle Marvin. It's everything for a child. Because people look at me and they're like, "But Mark, you're a professor at Yale, you drive a nice car, you have a nice house. Like you made it even though you had all that trauma." I'm like, "Yeah, but you don't know the journey and the journey I'm still on." I was blessed that my parents got me a therapist when I disclosed this. I was blessed that Uncle Marvin character was in my life. I was blessed that I got involved in the martial arts and became confident teaching the martial arts. I'm blessed that I got a degree in psychology, got a doctorate in psychology, and spent 25 years of my life writing curriculum, teaching this stuff. And I'm still trying to heal. And so when I think about all of the effort, and all the supports that I've gotten to have good well-being, and then I ask you to reflect for a moment on the children that you serve and do maybe a virtual walkthrough of your schools, and as you look at these children in your district, ask yourself, does every one of the students in my school have the permission to be their true, full feeling selves? Does every one of my students have the skills that they need, not to just succeed academically, but to succeed in building relationships and having good mental health and achieving their dreams? And you realize that we just have work to do in this space. We just do. Now, I know some of you, like many people, it's hard to relate sometimes to someone like me because I am comfortable being vulnerable. Of course, I waited till I was a full tenured professor. Whatever, you can't hurt me now. I turned 50 when my book came out, and I felt like, all right, 50 years old, it's time to be your true self. But a lot of people, I was being interviewed actually for a TV show recently, and the guy who was interviewing me, he's like, "Your story is really, it's heavy, man. Can we just talk about the research?" I'm like, "Not a problem, we can talk about the research, but case in point, right, is the discomfort we have with people being vulnerable." Now, the science. I don't need to spend a lot of time on this because I know you're going to go into this with your own training. But I'm just here to tell you that emotions matter for everything. They are at the core of being human. We learn what we care about. Think about that. We learn what we care about. And so without the heart in education, there's no learning. Now, without the strategies for dealing with your feelings, there's no learning either. The reason why I was a failing student, like literally, like C, D, F student in my late elementary and middle school years, it's obvious not because of my intelligence. I mean, let's get real. I'm really freaking smart. I am. I'm just not going to deny it. Like, I'm just going to tell you, I'm a smart guy. But the truth is, it's because I was emotionally messed up. I had no strategies. I was just anxious all the time, worried all the time, in fight or flight or freeze mode. I wasn't in learning mode. Right? The brain capacity was there, it just wasn't able to be utilized. And so just think about how many kids are not succeeding because they can't deal with their feelings. The second is decision making. We like to think we're rational creatures. I'm here to tell you, your emotions are behind every choice you make in life, whether you want to be conscious of it or not. Has anyone here ever eaten something without realizing it? Has anyone here ever, like during the pandemic, if you're a parent or in a relationship with a dog or a person, anybody here ever like just lose it 1 minute? Like just lose it with your kid? Like you're just like, you said something and you're like, in the moment, like, I can't take you anymore. And in that moment, you know, like, my feelings are driving my behavior. Right? It's like, no, you're just like, you're going for the jugular. I had that one night during the pandemic. My partner is from Panama, and my mother-in-law was living with us because she got stuck here because all flights to Panama were canceled. And we thought she was going to be with us for about 3 weeks, and it ended up being 7 months. By month 5, and I love this woman, which is great. And I speak Spanish, and I'm lucky that I can communicate with her until 8 o'clock. And then I'm done. I'm like, can't do any more Spanish tonight. I love you, but like I'm done. My brain is tired. I can't do it. Also, after 7 months of living with this woman, eating basically rice, beans, and salty chicken, I was like, we need to talk about the menu. Like, I'm literally bloated. And I'm drinking more water than I can, like, I have to go to the bathroom every 15 minutes. Like, we need to change the food in this house. And so there was one night where we just literally lost it. Like, we're sitting at dinner, and she was so angry with me and angry with everybody. And she looked at me, and she goes, are you really the director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence? And I just looked at her, and I go, not tonight. You know, and like, it was awful. It was like awful. And I'm like, Mark, but you are the director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence. You should have your strategies. I'm like, I can't think of any. Because I was so activated. Does anyone know what I mean? It's like, it's amazing, isn't it? And this is why this side of the report card is actually more challenging than the other side. I'll be honest, on my way here, I stopped off earlier at this fancy coffee shop in some little town. I forget the name of it. And I was like, can I please have an Americano with a little bit of steamed milk? $5.53. I'm like, you got to be effing kidding me. You think I'm going to pay $5.53 for a coffee? That was channeling my father, who would have like, he's turning over in his grave, like, that's a ripoff. And, you know, I wanted my coffee. I used my credit card instead of cash because I couldn't bear the thought of giving a $10 bill to get this coffee. But, you know, I was activated by it. I still know I got my change. I left a little tip. My math skills, you know, have been with me forever, and they don't really change. Does this resonate with you? Like, I'm pretty good at math, no matter where I am at. But somehow or another, when I get triggered, my 25 years as a psychologist can just fall by the wayside. Anybody relate to that? Yeah. It's a different operating system, but we don't appreciate that. We think that we teach this the same way we teach math and science, but it can't be taught the same way. It's experiential. It's about life. It's about refinement. It's about unlearning. Anyone here, just for curiosity, learn an unhelpful way of dealing with your feelings from one of your parents? Anybody want to just share publicly? Like, just, it's okay. Like that one, my mother had that phrase, I'm having a breakdown. Literally, 3 years ago, I hired a woman to run a big part of our center. We're traveling together to Oklahoma for this trip. And I'm like completely overwhelmed. And she's like, are you okay? I'm like, I'm having a breakdown. I'm like, shit, became my mother. Ugh. So why do I talk about this here? Because emotions are the drivers of our relationships. They're what connects us. My facial expressions, my body language, my vocal tone, all drive whether or not you're with me or not today. Just like superintendent's facial expressions, principal, counselors, educators, everybody. Your emotions are contagious. You just got to know that. And there's really good research to support it. And you can be overwhelmed or anxious or stressed and manage it, or you can be overwhelmed and anxious and stressed and not manage it. What's the difference? Well, good morning, everybody. I'm really nervous about this year. Like, there's a lot going on. If you look on Facebook, it's like a mess out there. And you know, like the parents and the school board and like the teachers and everybody's like in the different places. And I'm just not sure what's going to happen, but we're going to get our best. We're going to do our best, right? Yeah, we're going to do our best. And then everybody quits their job because they're looking at you like, you can't handle your feelings, leader. Like, if you can't handle your feelings, like there's nothing here for me. Now, what's interesting about that is that what the research shows is that when you kind of display a lot of anxiety as a leader, the people in your organization absorb it. They start feeling it, but they can't remember where it came from. So basically, we, as leaders, me as your presenter, because I'm the one standing, right? My feelings, right, how I express myself gets kind of brought into the environment. And then you start having emotions, but you're not really sure where they come from. Think about that in the classroom. If we know that emotions, right, are responsible for learning, and if we go in as anxious people and stressed people without knowing how to regulate our feelings, all of a sudden our students are going to be feeling it. It's going to affect their learning, and you're not going to know it, and they're not going to know it, which is scary. So we have a responsibility to be self-aware. Physical and mental health. Raise your hand if you have worked for more than one school in your career. One or more schools. Well, a lot of people, huh? 2 or more. Wow, a lot of people. 3 or more. Wow. Keep your hand up if it's really hard for you to keep a job. Just kidding. So think about it. If you had multiple jobs, or if you had other careers before you became a teacher or an educator, has anyone here ever worked in an environment that was just like, ugh? You know what I mean? Like, ugh. You woke up in the morning, you anticipated what it was going to feel like in that building, and you're like, ugh. Yes, you know what I mean? Well, guess what? I study that. It's called emotional culture or emotional climate. And what our research shows is the following. That feeling, that collective feeling in a school drives each teacher's individual stress levels. And that stress drives mental and physical health. So in our national study, we found that unhealthy emotional climates lead to stress levels, which lead to mental health challenges like anxiety, depression, sleep disorders for teachers. So just be aware of it. Now, the opposite is true. Positive cultural climate leads to more pleasant emotions, which leads to better health. Finally, performance and creativity. How many of you have ever worked with a student who you just saw like all the creativity and potential in, but somehow or another they couldn't get out of their own way? Anybody know what I mean by that? Like, you're just like, this kid has to be successful. Like, it's their creativity, their geniusness. but they just can't get out of their own way. This is why we know that emotional intelligence matters. Because when you try to be creative or achieve in life, the harder you achieve, the more likely you're going to make mistakes. The more feedback you're going to get that's not going to be to your liking. And if you don't have the strategies to deal with all of the obstacles to achieving your success, what happens is that most people give up. It's not because they don't have the potential. They have all the potential in the world. They just don't have the strategies to deal with disappointment, frustration, anxiety, feedback, and they crumble because of the feeling, not because of the skill. All right, everybody, please take a nice long inhale and a nice long exhale. So we have a concept in our center. We call it being an emotion scientist or being an emotion judge. What do you think I'm in favor of? Yeah, of course. So, what does it mean to be an emotion scientist? It means that you're open. There's no such thing as a bad emotion. Go figure. All emotions are information. Anxiety says there's uncertainty. Good to know. Maybe I'll be more careful. Stress, helpful. It gets granular. How specifically are you feeling? When you fail at regulating, what's the story you tell yourself? I'm such an idiot. I'm never going to get through this. Or, Mark, like I did with my mother-in-law. So after my mother-in-law had our falling out, I went to bed that night, and I thought, who's the richest person I know that will fly her out of here? No, anyway, that was not a helpful strategy, because we people don't know those people. And so I was like, all right, we don't know when the heck she's going home. I got to repair this relationship. So I thought, what am I going to do in the morning? I'm going to go downstairs and I'm going to suck it up and I'm going to apologize. Like, you know what, Irene? I'm sorry. Like, it was not a good day. Please don't use so much salt. I apologize, but can we talk through this? What can we do? Because I don't have a big house, and we're going to have to cross each other in the hallways, and we're going to have to look at each other. We're going to have meals together, and she didn't want to go out of the house for obvious reasons. And so that's the growth mindset for emotional intelligence. The fixed mindset is, you know what? I don't care about her. This is my house. She's going to play by my rules, and if she can't deal with how I feel, who cares? Anyone here ever work for or live with an emotion judge? It's like not cool. I got research on this. Here's what I'm here to tell you. People who are emotion judges, those people have people who work in their environments who are 50% less inspired, 40% more frustrated. They have 30% lower job satisfaction. They're 25% more likely to want to leave their jobs that year. And, believe it or not, they engage in unethical behavior because they just don't care. The opposite is true for the leader, manager, who is an emotion scientist. Think about the emotion judge, the way they respond to feelings. I'll give you an example. I share this one often because I give a talk at our university's surgery department. And surgeons are really known for their low egos. And so I give this talk, and at the end of my talk, you can imagine like a Yale surgeon. Oh, it's a nightmare. And so I give this talk, and at the end of my presentation, this kind of older surgeon guy stands up and he looks at me and goes, "What happened to Yale?" And I was like, "Excuse me?" And he goes, "Mark, this is Yale. We produce Nobel laureates, not nice people." And I was like, okay. Anyone else have another perspective on my presentation? You won't believe this. Another professor stands up and he looks at me and he goes, "Here's what I learned, Mark. Sometimes you have to be an ass because then the people who work for you just shut up and do what you tell them to do." At this point, I'm like literally like, don't know what to do. Like, where's my daddy? And I look over at the chair of this department. I'm like, are we making a movie here? Like, what the heck is going on? Like, I don't really understand this. And he started, literally had tears in his eyes. And he goes, why do you think I asked you to come in? It stinks to work for people who are emotion judges. You don't have a voice. You can't be your true self. They're not supportive. We don't want those people. I'm sorry. We got to strive to get that emotion scientist group. Rula. It was so funny. I did a talk yesterday. I won't name the district. And this gentleman introduced me. He's like, this is Mark Brackett, blah, blah, and he's the guy who does Rula. I'm like, Rula? Like, I mean, come on. Can you at least get that? It's like, ruler. Anyway, I apologize to all of my Long Island friends here. But it's ruler. Anyhow, first R, recognizing emotions. Being aware of self and other. Highly aware, self and other. There's a few interesting things about this, and we're going to try it right here. So all of you are beginning the new year. Let's test your emotion perception skills. Why not? Okay. How am I feeling? Content. Thrilled. That's thrilled? Okay. We're going to give you some drugs. What do you think? Interested? Uninterested. Wait. Thrilled? Uninterested. Great. Content. What'd you see? Apathy. No expression. I'm apathetic. Self-assured. Huh. Confident. So far we have not one overlapping emotion. How is that possible? I'm one person with one face. Content, thrilled, uninterested. You said content too. You said apathetic, and you said self-assured, and you said, say it again? Confident. So who's right? The superintendent's like, I'm just going to put it out there. The superintendent's like really off. You know, he's got great hair, but like, I don't know about, what do you think? Who's right? All of them are right? None of them. Then what the? It's based on, no one else knows. How the heck are we ever going to get along in this world? Nobody knows anything. This is the problem. We are overconfident in our emotion perception skills. What we tend to do is we tend to attribute emotion to people. We don't tend to find out how they feel. We make automatic assumptions, judgments, very, very quickly. There are a million biases associated with this too, from racial biases to gender stereotypes, and we need to be super aware of that, because otherwise we're basically putting feelings onto people, and then we treat them differently because of the way we attribute emotion to them. Understanding emotion. Where are these feelings coming from? Who can tell me the psychological difference between jealousy and envy? Free book on me. Signed with a gold pen. Jealousy and envy. What's the psychological? You got it? If you're jealous, say it louder. You want it, but you don't want someone else to have it. And if you're envious, you want what they have. All right, you're like 77% there. You'll still get the book. I give partial credit in my classes. Any other things that anybody could add to that? Jen, if you don't mind. I want you to come up. We can do our distancing thing. Jen and I are walking down Port Washington Way. And all of a sudden, she sees Dave. And she gives Dave a look. Give Dave a look like you've never given another man before. I notice my girl Jen giving a wink to Dave. How do I feel? That's jealousy. Because jealousy is a relationship-driven emotion. I feel threatened by Dave because he's got qualities that might be better than mine that Jen is attracted to. Jealousy is what happens in most classrooms, right? Kids perceive you as being more connected to this child than to them. It's hard to regulate. It's different than envy. Envy was when I was driving around here a little while ago, I'm seeing some like really nice houses on the water. I'm like, wow, that, professors don't live in those houses. That's envy, right? I don't hate the people for having it, a little bit, but I wonder, well, maybe one day I can have that. It's beautiful, it's cool. That's envy. Let's try another one. Anxiety, stress, pressure, fear, and overwhelm. This is like the extra credit one. Anxiety, stress, pressure, fear, overwhelmed. Anybody feel those feelings lately? What's the difference? The winner of this one gets lunch for two. Anyone confident? Psychological difference among these different states. Come on, this is like a room of hundreds of people who are highly educated. These are words that you use every single freaking day. And people are not willing to try to differentiate them. Anxiety, stress, pressure, fear, overwhelmed. Now, I'm going to give it, I did a talk for the American Association of Superintendents, or whatever the heck it's called. There were 300 superintendents on this presentation. The number one response was, there's no difference. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. There's no difference? Like, this is not a trick question. Take a look at the difference. Anxiety, uncertainty. How much time do I have? Only 2 more hours. Anxiety, uncertainty. Stress, too many demands, not enough resources. Pressure, something at stake is dependent upon your behavior. By the way, a lot of your high school students are going to say they're stressed out. It's not stress. It's their parents are not leaving them alone. It's pressure. And they're trying to do all this mindfulness stuff and all this kind of stuff to get rid of their stress when they got to get rid of their parents. Fear, I'm just telling you, that's what it is. It's different. It's a different experience. Fear, impending danger, overwhelmed, overcome by emotion. Here's a story. So, I don't know how many years ago, probably 8 years ago, I'm going up to be a full professor. Pretty confident in my publications and all that stuff you need as a professor. But I'm terribly stressed out. I mean, I had heartburn. I actually literally went to the hospital one night because I was so just lost and I was burning heart. I was hypochondriacal. I'm taking my blood pressure and listening to my heartbeat. And I go to the doctor and he's like, "Oh, you're going for tenure?" He said, "Yeah, that's what they all. This is what I see all the time." He goes, "Here's your Ativan for your anxiety. Here's your Prilosec for your heartburn." I'm like, "That's it?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, I'm the director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence. It can't be a 1-minute visit where you just give me 2 drugs to deal with my feelings. And I'm not opposed to drugs for feelings. I'm just opposed to no conversation, no inquiry, nothing. And so I was pissed. I really was pissed. And I decided to go for a nice, long, mindful walk. And I'm like, "Mark, how are you feeling?" Became my own Uncle Marvin. Am I anxious? I'm not really anxious. I'm pretty certain I'm going to get the tenure. I can't be that. Are you stressed? I got a lot on my plate, but I'm handling it all pretty well. I'm not. Pressure? Not really. Fear? No, I'm not afraid. And all of a sudden I said, is it overwhelmed? And everything clicked. Because I'm a workaholic, I don't give myself a break. So I work from 7 o'clock in the morning, then I go home and I go to my yoga class and I do my, my movements, I do my, beautiful poses, and I do my martial arts, and then I go home to eat dinner, and then I work more, and then at 11 o'clock and I'm like, doing email, and I'm like, I'm anxious. And it's like, no, go to bed. You're not anxious. Your brain is lying to you. And by the way, our brains lie to us. We try to make meaning out of our experiences, and we use language that we're familiar with. Oh, I'm anxious, I'm stressed. I was overwhelmed. What I needed to do was take stuff off my plate. I needed more freedom. I needed to watch The Voice, which is my new addiction, which I love. And now I feel better. I'm being serious. You got to label it to regulate it. You got to name it to tame it. I was adding, same thing by the way. So here I am, I'm this professor at Yale. I study my own undergraduates. Every one of the students, stressed, stressed, stressed. And I'm like, it's got to be deeper than that. It's got to be deeper than that. So I make all my students, I have a class of 500 students. I'm like, you're going to be journaling for the next 3 weeks about all of your stressors. And then we collected and we analyzed them. Here's what the stressors were. You have better hair than me. Your father makes more money than my father. You study for fewer hours than I need to study to get better grades. Your mother's more connected in Washington, D.C. Your father's connected in Hollywood. Your mother's this. Your father's this. You're friends with this. And on the surface, it might be stress. But what it was, really, was envy. These students are living in endless social comparison. Everybody's better off than they are. Everyone has more of this, and everybody's better than that. And so I go to the counseling center, and I say, I'm just curious. We have all these yoga programs, all these mindfulness programs at the university, but what's Yale's envy reduction program? And, I did this after I got tenure, because that was not, people were pissed. They're like, you're challenging us. I'm like, we have doing so much on campus. I'm like, whatever you're doing, every year I look at the data, and it's 20% up every year. So whatever you're doing ain't working. I honestly said, where is the science which shows that downward dog reduces envy? I had this vision, you're doing downward dog, and all of a sudden envy just comes out of your rear end. It's like, it just doesn't work that way. And I love yoga, but I don't know, the pose is not going to get rid of the envy. That's deep cognitive work, right? It's hard work to not be envious, to not be jealous. What are the conditions that are creating the envy? What are the conditions that are creating the jealousy? So much work. Okay. So let's spend some time just wrapping up together. Strategies. First, the first strategy for healthy emotion regulation is giving yourself the permission to have your feelings. Period. Your feelings or experiences, they're not good or bad. I'm going to say it again. Feelings are experiences. They're not something to be judged as good or bad. Second, if you are really overwhelmed and stressed and having lots of activation, you're not going to be able to use any cognitive strategy until you deactivate. Your brain is in fight-flight mode. You can't problem solve. You can't think clearly. You got to do some breathing exercises, some mindfulness exercises to just bring the energy down. Let's try one together. Can I get everyone to sit good in their seats, good posture? You're slouching. You're going to live longer if you have better posture. I have no research to support that. You just look a lot better to me. Now, just because, of current situation, just take little breaths. Just a nice long inhale and an exhale. My favorite strategy is one I learned 30 years ago. And we'll just try it. I'll share it with you. When I'm completely overwhelmed and I cannot get my mind off of whatever is making me out of my mind, I've learned as a scientist that your brain can only really focus on one thing at a time. So instead of focusing on everything that's going wrong in my life that I perceive to be going wrong, I focus on my breath. And I say something like the following as I breathe in. In. Everybody breathe in. And out as I breathe out. And then deep on the inhale, deep. And then slow on the exhale. And then the word calm on the inhale. And the word ease on the exhale. Put a little gentle smile on your face as you breathe in. And exhale and say release. We'll do that one more time. In. And out. And deep. And slow. And calm. And ease. Little smile. And release. Nice. Just a way to get your brain from being all over the place to just bring a sense of calm. Most people don't think of sleep, exercise, and nutrition as being linked to regulating your feelings, but there are inextricable links. Anyone here recognize that your fuse is shorter when you don't get enough sleep? There you go. Eat a lot of fatty foods, a lot of sugary foods, not able to focus as much. Guess what? Here's an interesting study. Randomly assigned study. You exercise, you sit still, you exercise, you sit still, you exercise, you sit still. And then somebody comes in and starts causing problems. What's going on here? And the question is, whose heart rate goes up more and who's more or less reactive? Do you think there are any differences? The exercise group, less physiological activity, less reaction. So think about that. You're putting movement into your life is a prevention strategy to help you regulate. I'm not going to tell you what exercise to do. You want to do step aerobics? Fine. I used to teach step aerobics. See that? V up, right, over the top with a little twist. I've done everything in my life. That was talking about trauma induction. I actually was in the best shape ever back then. Now I just worry all the time. Psychological self-care. Psychological self-care. Are you setting personal goals for yourself? Like, you deserve to have goals. Are we setting those goals for ourselves? Maybe it's about reading a book. Maybe it's about taking breaks during the day. Maybe it's about spending more time with someone that you care about. Social connection. During the pandemic, we all saw a lot of empathy, I think. I lost 2 family members from COVID. 2 of my aunts died of COVID. One in Spain, one here in New York. And it was interesting, when I posted about that, thousands of people were like, my God, I'm so sorry for your loss. And then like a week later, I was on CBS This Morning. Like, really good thing happened for Ruler. Like, national attention, like 5 people liked it. I'm like, wait a minute, why are people so attracted to supporting you when things go wrong, but so uninclined or to like, hey, wow, that's cool, congratulations. Here's what's interesting. Longitudinal research. We call it positive empathy. Finding the good, not just looking for ways of assuaging the misfortune. Noticing when something really positive happens and embellishing it for a little while, saying, I noticed that, I saw that, that was pretty cool. Congratulations on that. Really, I appreciate the way you did that. Do you know that kids over a 10-year longitudinal study, when they reflect back on their early childhoods, they feel more connected to the people who engage in that positive versus the traditional empathy. It's like those Uncle Marvins, right? They try to find the good. You're special in this way. I encourage you to look for that this year with your children. It's going to go a really long way. Cognitive strategies. Raise your hand if you've ever said something unkind to yourself. Anybody know what I mean by that? Oh, I tell you, one of the goals that I had, I set a personal goal during the pandemic. It was, I'm going to get fit more. I'm going to be exercising more. I don't have to commute anymore. I'm going to have all this time in the world. I'm going to get up and I'm going to have like a long day. And then one day I was like, I'm starting today. I was wearing my shorts. I went downstairs to my living room. I had my weights out, my little blocks for my stuff. I started doing crunches, and I was looking at my legs, which looked like Elmer's glue. And I was like, oh, God, you're so pale. And then I was doing the crunches, and I was like, I just was looking at myself, and I'm like, you're never going to have that, you know. And I was like, it's my first freaking 30 seconds being awake. I was like sabotaging myself within like 30 seconds. Can anyone relate to that? It's awful, isn't it? And I've been thinking a lot about that, and I've done some research on this. Here's a provocative statement. Our negative self-talk is usually defined by other people for us. Somehow or another, people find ways to say things to us that are unkind, that we start believing. I have a niece who is adopted from Guatemala. She is the most amazing thing in the whole world, and I had the privilege of flying to Guatemala with her mother to pick her up back 16 years ago. In kindergarten, she was horrifically bullied by other children, and I know what that's like. This time it was about race, because she's dark, and her mother is a Jewish redhead. And what happened is that she was in the playground, and a little girl went up to her and said, "You're a different color than your mother. That's disgusting." Now, she's my cousin, not my sister, but she's like my sister. She called me up, and she was like, "Mark, Esme was horrifically bullied in the playground. It's more. I heard it happen more than once already. I don't know what to do about this. I'm going to lose it. I'm getting in my Jeep, and I'm running over that kid and her mother." I'm like, "Hold on, let me help you out." Like, road trip to Binghamton, New York. They're in New York. So I road trip up to Binghamton, New York, and I have to tell you, think about that. You're a different color than your mother. That's disgusting. Took 10 seconds to say it. Esme couldn't get out of her head. She couldn't get out of her head. And she didn't want to go to school. And she was afraid to play with friends. And she didn't want to go on the playground. All of that from one phrase. And you don't know how much work it took to support Esme in shifting her self-talk. It was a lot of effort. She had to realize that we as a family have family members who are from different racial backgrounds, and that we all get along, and it's okay to be different colors. She had to realize at 5 years old that it is not okay for someone else to define who you are. That's not that easy to describe to a kindergartner. So now Esme is in 3rd grade, and she wants to be in the school play. And all of the memories of her bullying start coming up again. And she calls me with her mom and says, "Uncle Mark, I'm afraid to be in the school play. People are going to make fun of me." And now she has a little bit of a speech thing, and I don't want to be made fun of for that. And I really, Go back. We start working on strategies to help Esme. What are you going to say to yourself when you have those feelings of fear? What are you going to do? And I couldn't give her the strategies. It's not my job to tell you how to regulate. It's my job to be the compassionate emotion scientist that supports you in finding the strategies that work best for you. Which, by the way, is another different thing about Ruler. It's never about being the knower. You don't have to know. You just got to love and be compassionate and help the child explore and see and find what will work best for them. Long story short, as Esme does this amazing job in the school play, she runs off the stage. She's like, Uncle Mark, I use my strategy. I'm like, which one did you use today, Esme? She goes, I got that feeling in my stomach before I went on stage, and I took my breath. And I said to myself, Esme, face your fears. Now, I share that with you because I didn't have anybody until I was a teenager to help me face my fears. I was lost in the fear. Think about what it's like for a child to be lost in the fear, lost in the shame, lost in the anxiety, lost in the anger. And if we don't give them that permission to be their true, fulfilling selves and teach them the skills that they need and create the environments where they can be their true, fulfilling selves, what the outcomes are for them. We can't underestimate how much effort it will take to support us all in having a more self-compassionate cognitive talk versus being self-critical. The last thing I'm going to share is just having those routines that work for you. Just finding out what works for you. What time is the best time to get up to support you in having the best physical and mental health? When do you need breaks? When should you be eating? What kind of exercise do you put into your routine? Who do you connect with? One thing I will share with you is that we can be very forward-looking in life about these things. Like you can surround yourself with the people who bring you down, or you can surround yourself with the people who bring you up. It took me a long time to realize that I had the choice around who I hung out with. And I really have made a choice now. I just cannot be around the people who bring me down. Life is just too short to be around toxic people. So I know we're out of time, which makes me both angry and sad. I'm very excited that you'll be doing this ruler work in the district, integrating tools like the charter by thinking about how you all want to feel, learning that mood meter, applying it into all contexts from artwork to mood meter gifts, using apps that we're building, practicing that meta moment to be your best self, and the blueprint strategies to help students manage emotions and be better at perspective taking. So as we wrap up our time together, I just want to say a few last things. One, as I said before, evaluate your routines. Be that preventionist. Be aware of that emotional contagion that I spoke about earlier. Consider your best self. How do you want to be seen? How do you want to be talked about? How do you want to be experienced as an educator this year? And finally, let's try to put this all together. Number one, you got to give yourself the permission to feel. Number two, you got to be that emotion scientist and not the emotion judge. Number three, remember, this is about using all emotions wisely. There's no good or bad. It's about using every emotion wisely. Appreciate that this is life's work. It just is. Be that role model. Apologize, forgive, repair, get the help you need. Focus on systemic change. You're not doing the work until everyone has permission to feel. Everyone. No matter what their race is, no matter what their sexual orientation is, no matter what their beliefs are. Everyone deserves the right, has the right. All right. So, can I ask everyone to take a nice, long inhale? Nice, long exhale. September 1st, maybe 2nd? I don't even know. September 1st, 2020. You're beginning the school year. You're taking emotions really seriously. You're all emotion scientists. You're plotting yourself on the mood meter like you've never known before. Your best self shows up every morning. You've got more emotion regulation strategies that are helpful than unhelpful to help you achieve well-being and your goals. So it's June now. of 2022. What's different? You all know what it felt like at the end of last year. But imagining applying the principles of emotional intelligence throughout this school year to yourself and to your children and to families. What will be different for you? What do you see as you visualize? So I'm going to wrap up by saying, A, thank you for inviting me here. I feel deeply honored to be here. I'm trying to brush up on my public speaking skills. It's been a while. I'm used to doing Zoom and then like going to the bathroom and getting a cup of coffee. Now I got to drive home. So I hope my public presenting skills were not too off today. I know I said some things. I'm like, Mark, don't say that. Don't say that. Like the whole envy with the thing was like, oh, yeah, that was maybe too much. But I just want to say to wrap up that I hope I made a good case for why emotions matter. I hope you can see why it's effortful to do this work. And really why it's our moral obligation to ensure that every child gets an emotion education, which in the end, I'm just going to say, means that it's our moral obligation to be the best possible role model for adults. And so as I wrap up my time with you, I'll just repeat one of my favorite quotes from Maya Angelou. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Hope you have a fantastic year. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.